Welcome to Hairblazers, the podcast where we empower you to disrupt the beauty industry, starting with your chair and your salon. You can focus on running your business and tune in here to find out how to keep it moving forward. I'm Colleen, the Director of Education and Business Development for the Verde Salon Group here in Winnipeg.
And I'm Roberto, owner of Verde Salon and the Aveda Institute, Winnipeg.
Today we're talking about people and profit.
People and profit, yes.
Are both possible?
Why not? Why not? People and profit. I guess this is something, this is a topic I believe that, I don't know, I'm not quite sure how people perceive it, but I do know that back in the day, it was profit over people. That's what it really did look like. When you talk big corporation, I think that's a lot of the conception that's out there is that big corporations value profit over people. I think that's starting to change today. When we started out, I believe it was, I really wanted it to be people over profit. And I think we held that philosophy for like 2-3 years. And although the salon was profitable, there were definitely some challenges that came with people over profit. But today we found ourselves in a new place, and that's people and profit. And I truly do believe that it could be both. So why don't we start with let's talk about what profit is.
It's not a bad word.
It's not a bad word. It's a great word. I think it's an important word. And if you're not aware of what profit is, once we take in all of the revenue that comes in, all of the income that comes into the salon or into the business, minus all of the expenses, what's left over from that is profit. And typically we're seeing salons have a low profit margin. I think we're sitting somewhere around 3-4% right now, industry-wide. And there's a lot of room and a lot of opportunity to definitely grow that. And we could have a completely different discussion as to how to grow profit lines. Maybe we'll get into a little bit of today. But the question then becomes, where do people come into that? And how do we support our people without compromising our profit? So let's start with profit, and let's start with what some of the challenges are around profit. We talk about this on a regular basis. Money coming in isn't necessarily a problem. It's money going out that can become a problem. And it's one that we typically have a lot of control over. So just based on the conversations we have, Colleen, what are some of the areas of expenses that we can have a really good handle on a weekly basis?
Yeah, so like product expenses. So as far as back bar product, color is a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
I know a lot of salons, I think, turn a blind eye to it because they're probably terrified to know how much wastage is actually happening in their salon.
Sure. And it's not easy not easy to measure. It definitely takes a lot of work. Not impossible by any means. And there's tools to help with that. Vish, we obviously work with Vish. Shout out to Vish. Great company to work with. Vish, if you're not familiar with it, weighs product going out to services and then weighs wastage coming back in, really tells us where we're at with our wastage on a weekly basis. But that's a big one. Our expense for that, we try to manage it around 6.5%, which I think there's opportunity to be even lower, but at this point, I think that we're doing pretty well at 6.5%. And that includes our color, that includes our product that we're using for our guests. But that is definitely one area to look at. If your salon is not as profitable as you want to, or if it's not even profitable, that is one of the first places you want to look at, because easily you can be looking at thousands of dollars per month just going down the sink.
I was going to say, I'm not sure if this is even the time because I'm sure we'll get into it, but something that comes to mind with, the whole Vish is it takes time and it takes effort on your stylist's part or on your team's part to try to bring these costs down. So that's one of the reasons why it's so important that they know that you have their back as well, that people are really important, because if they don't think they're important, they're just going to keep wasting color and not necessarily because they're like spiteful, but because it's just easier.
Of course. And it's easier to default to just what you know. I think that's an important piece to speak about, is that Vish is an investment. There's obviously costs that come along with this, and it takes work to make it happen, and to have people follow along. And I think one of the things that we're going to be talking about today is just real transparency as to why we're doing these things. I think if people know the why behind we're trying to control expenses and what it means to them, what it means to the business, I think then there's a mutual respect between the business and the employees in it to really help it move forward. And in this case, we're talking about being profitable. And of course, we should be talking about the salon's biggest expense,
which is wages.
You got it, Colleen. Which is wages. And typically a great place to be for How should we define this? So we should define this as your service expense. So the cost
Service
of
provider.
service provider expense, thank you, should be around 43%. On top of that, you'll have management wages, you'll have frontline wages and associate or assistant wages
Right.
as well too. Um, but really having a good control on that and understanding of where those are on a bi-weekly basis when payroll's going out, you're taking every possible opportunity to feed your bottom line. So two major expenses, I think those are probably the two. I'm sure there's plenty of others that we could talk about that fly under the radar that
Right.
could have a huge impact, but those are the two real big ones that we're talking about, and the two that your employees directly affects. When we're talking people and profit, both parties are affected here. So let's talk about people. So we've talked about profit. We understand why profit's important to the salon. It's what makes it go. And at the end of the day, a business has to be, financially viable to continue. But the people aspect, and a lot of times I have conversations with salon owners, and the question is, it's expensive to treat employees well, or it's expensive to create an environment that employees really want to work in. And I truly believe that that's not the case. A lot of opportunities. So let's talk about people, and in particular, what are people looking for? What are our employees looking for today?
Well, when you say it's expensive, to have an environment that people want to work, it's expensive to not have an environment where people want to work and you have constant turnover.
Great point.
So bringing on employees is not an inexpensive thing. And when you lose them, to find more, like it's just like a constant roller coaster. Whereas if you have this awesome environment that people want to be part of and your turnover's low, you can focus on so many other things.
Yeah, there's definitely a cost to recruiting new stylists. There's definitely a cost to training stylists. And if you have a revolving door, the cost of retraining can get very expensive. So people and profit, it's really important to focus on how do we create an environment for our employees that they really feel good coming into, and how do we maintain a profitable salon. One of the things that I typically want to look at first is, what are we putting back into the business? And when we're taking a look at what we're putting back in, many different areas, you could talk about upkeep of the salon or marketing or whatnot. But what are we putting back in, directly? And this is something we've talked about in a previous podcast with compensation versus commission or wages. Right. So that compensation piece, what are those pieces that we've put into place in the salon that don't necessarily cost a lot of money, but or in some cases they have an expense, but really do create a fabulous culture for us?
Well, I think the first thing to focus on, and I came into this career as a hairstylist to begin, and I think the thing that really opened my eyes was the transparency when I ended up working at a salon where they are really transparent with expenses. I don't know if a lot of salon owners are just afraid to share numbers. They just feel like they need to keep it tight to themselves.
I would say yes.
You would say yes?
Yeah, I definitely worked in those environments. I grew up in an environment like that, and there's definitely a fear of sharing. I don't even know what the psychology is behind it, but it definitely exists. So talk a little bit more about the transparency and why that's important.
Right. Well, coming from a stylist side, talking about the fear as well, is I think it's natural for people when they start working somewhere to automatically think it's like us versus them. Like, oh, they're trying to get as much money out of me for paying me as little as they possibly can. And I think it's really hard to get away from that. So one of the ways that I learned to start to really trust, and not that I was way overboard on that, but I mean, I think it's a natural thing, was a salon owner that I was working with who was completely transparent with all the numbers. And this was even before you.
Wow.
Even before you. So this was back in my day. And wrote out the numbers, every single one of them, every line item. This is how much money we spend on wages. This is how much money we spend on back bar. Broke it all down. And then when I could see in the end, yeah, maybe it looks like I'm bringing in all this money. Where is it going? Well, that's where it's going. So I think once that transparency piece came in, I was able to kind of just let my guard down. And I think a lot of stylists are more able to do that. They just want to understand.
Yeah, I think that they want to understand. And I think they also have to respect it. Respect what it means to them. And I think that if you're working in an environment that you're not happy in, I don't think that there's a percentage that you could possibly take that is going to make you happy. I think that, if you're happy in the environment you're in, you see where the expenses are going, you see how that benefits both you and the salon owner and everybody involved, then it makes sense. And I believe that's where you kind of find that happy place where everybody can work and understand what one means to the other and what those relationships mean to each other. Sorry. So, we're talking about the people, we're talking about what that means to them. I believe, having a good culture means investing back. And, we're talking about profit means having a healthy profit margin. And how do we make all this work? So, right from the get-go, you need to have a budget in place. You need to have a plan. A budget really just is a financial plan of how you're going to make your business run, how it's going to work. And these are all line items that we budget for every year. So we budget for education, we budget for team building events, we budget for travel. We know that travel is always a great thing, right? People enjoy travel.
Yes.
And we look at how that affects our bottom line. And if our bottom line isn't big enough, then we take a look at what our revenue goals are, ensure that our revenue goals are realistic and are set to really meet those expectations that our employees have from us, and what we want to be able to contribute back to our employees. And I really do feel that that's how we get to a place of people and profit. I would say that there's a lot of times throughout the year that you do have to make some decisions that favor one or the other, where we make a decision because expenses have gotten out of line, so we need to tighten our expenses up, which then has a trickle down effect to the employees. And I definitely believe that there's many times throughout the year where we're making decisions that heavily favor our employees and our team members over our profit. And
It's a give and take.
It's a give and take. I don't necessarily think one is right or one is wrong. I think it's what's right for that moment. When we have employees that are in need, when we have employees that want to take more time off than what's been allotted, you have to take all these things into consideration and ask yourself what is really best for them and how do we make that work within the business? And then vice versa, what is best for the business right now and how do we make that work for our employees? And we're going back with a healthy culture, with transparency. I think it all just makes sense in the end for everyone that's involved.
Absolutely. Well, I guess without profit, you wouldn't even have people. And without people,
wow,
there's no
I guess
profit.
we wouldn't have profit. Well, we're a service-based industry, and our business heavily depends on the people who are in it. So, believe if we can create those environments, create a great culture, create an environment where compensation is fairly paid out, where the transparency is in place, so people really do understand what their compensation looks like, and what that means to the salon, and then also have an overall goal for the business. Do your employees know where the direction the business is going? How do they play a role in that? What is their part in it? And what is the opportunity for them? I think once we've put all those things into place, people really do people do feel a lot better to stand behind it and get behind it.
So I think there's a lot of salon owners who may not even know the direction their business is going in, and maybe they're not sharing their numbers or being transparent because maybe they're not even sure.
Yeah, that's very possible. And I think that, I don't necessarily know that, all salon owners are going to have a much bigger picture than what's happening in front of them right now. And that's fine as long as I believe the team knows that.
Yes.
And I believe that your actions and your intentions match up with where you're at. So if we're not planning to grow the salon any further, if we're happy with where it's at, ensure that the people within the business know that, ensure that people within the business are being compensated fairly for what you're producing as a salon owner, as whatever the business is producing. And just find a place where you're comfortable with being transparent. At the end of the day, there is nothing wrong with making profit. There is nothing wrong with being successful. But by ensuring, if you're bringing that profit in, by ensuring that you're investing back into your team, then I believe everybody's okay with that. I don't see why anyone would have a problem with it.
Thank you for listening. Remember to leave us a review, share with your team, and tune in next month for the next episode.